Let's take a break. Coffee break, that is. Hora del cafecito.
Welcome to another coffee break where we're able to learn, discuss, and discover various topics. So I'm glad you're able to join me on your coffee break today. So grab yourself a hot cup of coffee or a cold cup of coffee and have a seat. Today's topic, we will be looking at how to speak so that students listen, right? So I get that question quite a bit, especially when it comes to teachers, program staff, anybody really dealing with youth specifically, but of course this can also happen with and when dealing with adults. But today's topic is very specific on how to speak so that your students listen, regardless of the fact that they are youth or adults. So, and it's very common that teachers, instructors, facilitators, especially when you find yourself working with youth on a day-to-day basis, that you bemoan the state of listening in your classroom. And in staff meetings or in debriefings, quite often we hear the adults say that, sometimes I feel like I'm talking to myself, or I say it over and over again and I still don't get it, or it's almost as if they've completely tuned me out. And it's always misplaced blame, I think, for the most part, and it's rarely the fact that they point out themselves as to the reason why this is happening. And if you are one of those who will rarely look inward and analyze your own practice, your own process, then you definitely need some help. These kind of people always assume that students either listen well or they don't, right? And that they have little to do about it, and that's never a consideration. The truth of the matter is that you have a profound effect on listening, right? And that will be dependent on your very own consistency, your temperament, your likability, your clarity, your own very presentation skills, and even your own tidiness in the space that you're using, whether it's your classroom or a borrowed space. And all these are very, very important factors into ensuring that your students are practicing their effective listening skills. And of course, there are strategies that can improve listening almost instantaneously. That you can do some research on. Hopefully I'll be able to provide some insight as to some of those strategies today. But of course, one of the most important factors is how you speak when giving directions. What follows are three simple changes that can make a huge difference in the interaction or in the participation in your classroom, right? But it's very important how you speak when giving directions. Here we go. Number one, talk less. Most teachers talk too much, right? Most instructors talk too much. Most facilitators talk too much. Your voice is a looping soundtrack every single day, right? Reminding, warning, micromanaging in some cases, and guiding students through every this, every that, right? If you cut the amount of talking you do by a third and focus only on what your students need to know, then you will have greater impact. Your words will reach the intended destination, right? You will reach the intended outcome, and your students will begin tuning you in rather than tuning you out. So that's number one, talk less. Number two, lower your voice, right? It's a technique that definitely works, and definitely a technique that needs to be used more. It's common to increase your own volume to get students to listen better, right? But a loud voice is actually unpleasant and too easy to hear. it causes them to look away and get busy doing other things and get busy with other people. But when you lower your voice and speak just loud enough for students in the back of the room to be able to hear you, they instinctively lean in because, right, they need to hear because you're speaking in a lower voice. They stop moving, they stop talking, they stop rustling in their chairs, stop messing around, that kind of thing, right? So they read your lips, or they try to read your lips if they're not able to hear. If the room is still a little too loud, they look for facial expressions and look for that body language. And by requiring a small amount of effort, your students will listen more intently. So get into the practice of lowering your voice so that it takes them just a little bit of work, a little bit of effort to be able to hear you, right? So that's a technique and a tactic that definitely works. So the next one would be stop repeating. And it's a tactic and it's a practice that's used in teaching circles, right? To become repetitive. But when it comes to working with a certain age range, especially when we're talking about, I'm going to say 12 and older, we have to move from the teaching style called, or the method called pedagogy, and rather flip it and turn it into andragogy, which is the teaching of adults, right? So when you repeat the same directions over and over again, you train your students not to listen at the first time because they know that you're going to repeat it, right? And you're encouraging apathy and you lighten their load of responsibility because in their minds, you have already trained them to say, he or she's going to say it again. I don't have to listen the first time. I don't have to shut up the first time. I don't have to be quiet. I don't have to stop doing what I'm doing, right? Saying it once creates urgency. It motivates action and causes students to stay locked in the sound of your voice, right? You if they know that you're only going to say it once, it ensures, and especially if you're calling for their attention, right? Attention, please, or however it is, that you call for attention with hand gestures, with voice, however it may be. That saying it once again creates its urgency and it motivates the action and causes students to stay locked into the sound of your voice because they know that an instruction is only going to be given once. And it also invests them into their own learning, right? They begin to understand that education isn't something that is done to them, but rather it's something that they go out and get for themselves. But you must stay the course. If you're going to say and tell them that you're not going to repeat anything, you're only going to say it once, that you stay the course. Right? That's very, very important because if you're teaching them along the way, because at the beginning of the year you said that you were going to say things once, but you're continually repeating yourself, then you're teaching them that, at the end of the day, you're still going to repeat it. So why should they listen to you, right? If you're struggling with listening, the above stated strategies or what I shared with you. So it's important that you stay the course. So if you're struggling with listening, the strategies that I shared with you will do wonders. At first, yeah, it'll probably cause things to get worse, right? Because you're going to have to constantly stop and ensure that people are getting used to the new instructions, right? And reminding them that you're only going to say it once, and then you're going to have the nagging, you're going to have the talking back. So it'll get worse before it gets better. But that's because your students have to grow accustomed to you taking on the burden for their listening, right? So they might ignore you, but if you institute this at the beginning of your lesson, at the beginning of your workshop, at the beginning of your school year, if you're a teacher, right? Then they will become slower to act, but what you want and what you expect out of them is going to happen. Again, just be patient. And if they are slower to act, when you have to change that, your process in the middle of the year, this is normal, right? They're going to push back. but it tells you how far you can tap into your techniques, into your tool chest, and how far it will take you. But once they feel the shift in responsibility from you to them, right? Because they need to be responsible for their learning, right? If they can't hear what you're having to say, they're going to start to fail, right? Trust me, they'll begin to change. They'll begin looking at you, tracking your movements, and anticipating what you want them to do next, right? Because they're, if they see you use your space, you're walking around the room, and you are talking less, you are repeating less, they will know that there is a purpose behind your movement. There's a purpose behind you wanting to get their attention. And so they're going to always be on the ready for listening for directions, right? They'll be anticipating that. And of course, they'll be nodding their heads and eagerly completing your directions because they don't want to fall behind. They'll become empowered to do for themselves because responsibility feels good, right? Because you've recognized the change in behavior, right? Make sure that you do that. That's important because it fills them with pride to know that they've done a good job. At the end of the day, it just makes good listeners, right? And if you haven't done this already, make sure that you are preparing it for your next workshop, your next training, your next activity, your next school year, right? But make sure, again, 3 very, very important tips to ensure that your students are listening to what you have to say, and especially when it comes to instructions: talk less, lower your voice, and stop repeating. Fairly simple. But that's it for today's coffee break. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell, and share this video. So get back to whatever it is that you were doing, and we'll see you on our next coffee break. Should you want a workshop on this topic, feel free to get at me, Lates.